Gerry Cotten died in India on December 9th.
It seems like a story right out of some sci-fi movie. The CEO of one of Canada's biggest cryptocurrency exchanges died while he was on a trip to India due to some kind of a bizarre stomach-related illness.
So he goes to India. As soon as they check in, Gerry Cotten gets a stomach ache, and the next day he's dead.
More than $250 million of client money is missing.
Where's my money? Where's everyone's money?
Along with his death, the problem here is also access to his laptop, and that laptop contains the $250 million, and they all might be gone for good.
QUADRIGA CX says it lost access to the cryptocurrency after the death of its 30-year-old CEO, Gerry Cotten. The missing coins are held in so-called cold wallets. Cotten had the only virtual keys to those wallets when he died.
Well, there's only one lesson that could be drawn from this tragic episode, that sometimes it is better to share your passwords.
That's crazy. And then he goes, what if he's not really dead?
A month before he died, he wrote up an extremely detailed will. When he died, she gets all the assets.
Someone came to me and said, dude, he's not dead.
Exhume the body and frickin' check the DNA.
Pretty much everyone thought he faked his death.
There's some people suggesting that maybe he's not dead. Is that what you mean?
Yes, there are some theories.
You died in a car crash.
I died in a fiery inferno of a car crash, yes. I ended up getting my own death certificate, a police report, and witness testimony.
Gerald.
Yes.
You were born, now you're here. What happened in between?
He was a really bright guy. He was really funny.
He's been doing this kind of scammy stuff since he was young.
Flip a coin, he could be a bumbling idiot or an evil genius.
Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel.
Today I want to talk about Gerry Cotten, aka Gerry. Now, Gerry was the CEO of QUADRIGA CX. QUADRIGA CX was the largest Bitcoin exchange company in Canada. So when Gerry died, QUADRIGA had $200 million worth of clients and investor money that seemingly vanished because Gerry was the only person with the passwords and Gerry was dead. Or was he? There is a very popular conspiracy theory going around that Gerry actually faked his own death and stole the $200 million. But then there are other people who are like, it's extremely hard to fake your death. There's just no way. No. So I want to do what I usually do on my channel, which is I want to give you guys the facts. We'll discuss the theories and then you can decide for yourself. But first, this video is sponsored by SKILLSHARE. SKILLSHARE is an online learning community. They have thousands of classes for creators where you can explore new skills or you can deepen passions you already have. I know a lot of people are interested in learning something new in the new year. I mean, me personally, New Year, same me, but some new skills would be nice. One of the classes that I'm really into right now is indoor gardening, grow houseplants, veggies, and herbs. I like that it's focused on indoor. It's just easier because you see the plants and you can address them right away. At least that's what I'm thinking because I killed everything outdoors. I like the visuals. If you hook me in with visuals, then I'll start paying attention. ADHD. The first 1,000 people who click the link in my description will get a free 1-month trial to Skillshare and you can start exploring your creativity today. Thank you guys for sitting through that and thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video again. I really do appreciate it. Okay, so the whole thing popped off in India. You see, Gerry and his new wife, Jennifer, were on their honeymoon in a gorgeous hotel in Jaipur when Gerry started having some tummy troubles. You see, Gerry had Crohn's disease and he seemed to be having a really bad flare-up. At first, the doctors thought it was something called traveler's diarrhea, which is self-explanatory, but then his conditions really rapidly worsened and he had like 3 heart attacks in 24 hours. The blood work showed he had septic shock And so he died. He was 30 years old, and within 24 hours, that stomachache had evolved to such a point that he had died. And this is where things started to get weird. First of all, there was no autopsy, and then the doctor that they hired to embalm Gerry's body refused because she said that everything went against protocol. This doctor said that she felt like there was something off. The body came from a hotel when it was supposed to come from the hospital. Then the documentation and paperwork wasn't the way it was supposed to be. She asked the person questions about Gerry's, health and conditions. That person couldn't answer. And so she just felt like something was off. Quote, Cotten's body was then transported, although it is unclear how, to another facility that accepted the corpse for embalming. This other facility was an anatomy school, and they didn't really ask that many questions. And then from there, the body was transported back to Canada with Jennifer Robertson. Jennifer Robertson is Gerry's wife. They had just gotten married right before this trip. It was their honeymoon, actually. And Gerry had written a will just 4 days before their trip. And it turns out he left pretty much everything to Jennifer. And so when Jennifer came back to Canada, instead of telling clients and investors that Gerry died on their honeymoon, she instead kept it a secret and made moves to secure the bag. Assets, property, planes. This is a quote from someone who was interviewed at the private plane, like where they store the private plane. Is that an airplane hangar? I don't know. They interviewed that person who worked there, and she says that Jennifer Robertson called her when she came back to Canada before announcing Gerry was dead. She said, quote, "Gerry's dead. Promise not to tell anybody." Ms. Robertson did not specify why her husband's death had to be kept secret. On January 10th, Ms. Sibley called Ms. Robertson because someone was interested in buying the plane. She asked Ms. Robinson if she wanted to sell the aircraft. She said yes, as soon as possible. Ms. Sibley said she wanted to let the potential buyer know why the plane was for sale, so she asked Ms. Robertson if she could disclose that Mr. Cotten had died. Ms. Robertson agreed. And then over a month after Gerry dies, Jennifer Robertson finally announces to the clients, I think it was a Facebook post, the QUADRIGA's Facebook page, she announces his death. And she doesn't say anything about these passwords that are missing in the funds, so just that he died, okay? So at first people are like, oh, wow, how tragic. But then shortly after, like a few weeks after that, Jennifer files for creditor protection. And it's in these court documents that she reveals that not only is Gerry dead, but he took the passwords with him. The passwords are nowhere to be found. She says she searched the house, she couldn't find it. There's no mention of it in the will, which we're going to talk about that. And that essentially they can't access $200 million worth of client and investor money. It's just gone. It's locked in a digital prison and no one has the key.
Canada's largest cryptocurrency exchange is in hot water. People are stuck with no access to their money, Scott.
Yeah, this is a real mystery. Gerry Cotten, he's the founder of QUADRIGA CX. Along with his death, the problem here is also access to his laptop, and that laptop contains the $250 million, and they all might be gone for good.
As you can imagine, the customers were pissed because not only were they not told about this when they saw when he actually died, it had been almost 2 months, but on top of that, they actually prioritized investor money over client customer money.
The priority for any assets that are involved with this company goes to the investors of the company and not the account holders that have their money with the company.
So likely the little guys who had their life savings or some amount of money that to them is huge, right? They're shit out of luck. Also in the court documents, it was revealed that Gerry had written a will just a few days before the trip to India. And it was a weird will. It was extremely detailed in things that you wouldn't think it would be, but then in other things that are like should be the main focus of the will, there's no mention of it. It left 100,000 Canadian dollars for the care of their chihuahuas. Why is there no dead man switch? What that means is like a dead man switch is you have a person who is responsible for very sensitive information, such as passwords to huge amounts of money. For example, a dead man switch could be if the account is not signed into for a certain amount of days, an email automatically gets sent out to certain people with that sensitive information. Well, there was no dead man switch here. There was no mention of anything in the will that could help someone know that there was a dead man switch. And this is when people started to say, we think he faked his death. So the only thing that people had a mention of a dead man switch was from Gerry, who said that he kept the passwords in a safe that was bolted to the attic in his house. And so when he died and the will came out, one of his colleagues went to his house and looked at that area and found 4 holes where the bolts would have been, but there was no safe or anything there. So now people really thought he faked his death and left with the money, and ha ha ha, the joke's on you. He's like in some beach somewhere in an island sipping margaritas, or maybe, what is it called? Mai Tais. Pina coladas. A beer maybe. The money's gone. Gerry's gone. Everything's been left to Jennifer. So now everybody is looking at who? Jennifer, right? Here's a quote. It says, after some digging, CBC learns that Cotten's widow has a company called Robertson Nova Property Management, which was incorporated in June 2017, 2 months after she changed her last name to Robertson, because that's another thing about Jennifer. She's changed her name a few times. She was Jennifer Forger, and then she changed her name to Jennifer Griffith, and lastly Jennifer Robertson. That's the name she goes by now, and she purchased property under all of these names over the years. Then they would move it into a trust. This trust is going to factor in later. The more information that came out, the more pissed the customers were being. Literally, like, I found a meme of a cartoon of someone pissing on a grave, and they have it like, it says Gerry Cotten's name on it. These online sleuths on Reddit, which you can always count on online sleuths, so they were angry and they started digging. And these online sleuths, they found some skeletons in QUADRIGA CX's closet. First thing they found are some leaked text messages. In leaked text messages sent before his death, Cotten bragged about his extravagances. I'm still cleaning the mess from our fondue party we had on the weekend, LOL. Then he mentioned having a safe bolted to the rafters in the attic. He joked about retiring soon, and he referred to his honeymoon in scare quotes. You know, like this. He said, honeymoon. QUADRIGA was founded by 2 people, Gerry Cotten and Michael Patron. And he was essentially the brains of the operation. He did the back end, and Gerry was more of the face. Now, Michael Patron, it turns out, was not who he says he was. Mike's real name is actually Omar Danani, and Omar is a certified scammer who had reinvented himself as Michael Patron. Someone who is in the Bitcoin scene in Canada said, quote, "It was weird. It was quickly very clear that he wasn't who he said he was. Sometimes he'd introduce himself as Michael from India. Sometimes he'd say he was Michael from Pakistan or Michael from Italy, but it came from a place of organization. He knew what he was doing. It wasn't his first rodeo. One day he showed up with Cotten, who behaved like a runt little brother, but, as one friend put it, in a gross kind of way. Sycophantic, almost submissive. When Patron told a stupid joke that nobody found funny, Cotten would burst into wild laughter." It turns out that Mike and Gerry go way back. You see, Gerry was a very tech-savvy kid. A former classmate of his said that he was just always leaps and bounds beyond most of the computer teachers, that Gerry used to rush his assignments in class so that he can find ways around the firewalls that were blocking certain websites at his school so he can game and go on websites he wasn't supposed to during class. So he was already like hacking the system as a kid. In 2003, there was a forum. This forum was called Talk Gold, and it was basically like a early digital currency forum where they use something called e-gold, which is supposedly backed by real gold, but it's like a digital currency. It's like a precursor to Bitcoin. And on this website, there were two users. One profile was Patron, that was Mike, and the other profile was Skeptor, that was Gerry. So Mike joined in April 2003, and 3 months later, Gerry joined as Skeptor, and Gerry was 15 years old at the time that he was on this Talk Gold forum. And what ended up happening on this forum is that Gerry was promoting Ponzi schemes. And so basically, Gerry tried to scam Mike, and then Mike tried to scam Gerry back, and then they ended up becoming friends and started scamming together. So they were in it together, and they became known as, and I didn't make this word up, this is what they call them on this article that I read, they're known as board whores. It means that they spent hours and hours a day on these message boards. A few months after they meet and they're scamming together, Gerry starts his first own pyramid scheme, and he calls it S&S Investments. Maybe it stands for Scammer and Scammer Investments. And he's 15 and a half years old at this time. It says, I'm afraid I'm not going to fill this section of the page with the usual bump about how your returns are made. We do not invest in stocks, bonds, shares, precious metals, or antiques. All I will say is that we will generate your return and that we are not what is called a Ponzi or pyramid scheme. Nothing is convincing that someone is not a pyramid scheme than when they go, I'm not a pyramid scheme. It actually was a pyramid scheme, and it was a type of scam that's very common with digital or cryptocurrency called an exit scam. Basically, for simple people like me, an exit scam is where you scam. At first, you are able to give people a return on their investment. There is money, but eventually, the pyramid starts to collapse. You're pulling money from here and there. You don't have enough money to pay back your investors. And so you exit with whatever money you have left. Exit scam. And Gerry's been doing this since he's 15 years old. S&S Investments was his first exit scam. He left all these angry investors. He shut down the website. He started another one, started scamming again, and so on and so forth. Then Mike, aka Omar, got into some big trouble. He got arrested for scamming. Essentially, basically, there was this website called shadowcrew.com. It was like a dark web kind of thing where they sold credit card information. You could do identity theft, a lot of money laundering. So there were shady connections with things like drugs and trafficking. Sorry if you can hear my dog snoring, Diesel. You would think he actually does something like work. Mike, aka Omar, gets busted. He goes to prison. He pleads guilty. They give him 18 months. He serves his time. He gets out. And what does he do? He changes his name, because at first his name was Omar Denani. During this court proceedings, you can see he changed it to Omar Patron. And then once he got out of prison, he did the full change to Michael Patron. So now he's got a new name and he starts a new business. He goes right back to Talk Gold and he starts scamming again, this time with Midas Gold. And this is a company that's similar to QUADRIGA, but instead of the Bitcoin, they're using this e-gold currency. Whatever, the technical stuff doesn't matter. The point is he gets out of prison, he starts scamming again. And guess who he's scamming with? Gerry. And the reason why we know this is due to a Redditor, an online sleuth. They found that Midas Gold listed as its contact gerald.cotten@gmail.com. Long story short, they have to do another exit scam. The heat gets turned on and they don't get in trouble, but a major company that they were working with gets busted. And so they decide to do the exit scam thing again. They dip out and they come back with a new business, a new name. What is it called? QUADRIGA CX. Yes, the very company that is the cause of all this stuff. Michael Patron and Gerry Cotten are listed as co-founders of QUADRIGA CX. And instead of e-gold, it's now Bitcoin. Bitcoin is booming. Everyone's talking about Bitcoin. So they become this huge thing in Canada. Nobody knows that Michael is Omar. But the thing is, as much as it looked like things were doing really well for them, they actually weren't. They were operating at a loss. And he and Mike decide to take the company public so that they can raise money.
You raised a bunch of money. That's awesome. Congratulations. What are you going to do with it?
Scale. The company has been bootstrapped since the launch. The employees have had no salary, and we would like to scale. So we will be hiring additional staff, more salespeople, marketing, support staff to assist with this influx of new users. We're already Canada's largest Bitcoin exchange.
That creates a falling out between them. They end up not going public, and Mike supposedly leaves because of that. He wanted to go public, Gerry didn't, or Gerry messed it up, and long story short, Mike leaves the company, and when he left, he took the entire board of directors with him, which was only 2 people, his fiance and an associate. So that was weird. So now it's Gerry by himself running QUADRIGA CX. The brains of the operation, the back end is gone. It's just the face, Gerry. And the problems are just beginning, because it turns out that beginning from 2015, Gerry was stealing customers' money. Simply put, okay, he was creating fake Bitcoin and fake money. And he was using that fake Bitcoin and fake money to buy real Bitcoin or trade it for real money. But then he was putting the fake stuff and moving it around the company, so it was going in customers' accounts that he took the real money from. So you're a customer, you check your balance, you think you have $10,000, but you don't know that $5,000 of that $10,000 is fake money. Or your Bitcoin, half of it is fake Bitcoin. You don't know. But that's essentially what was going on behind the scenes, what Gerry was doing. In addition to stealing their money, he had no internal records of any kind, meaning he didn't do bookkeeping, he didn't have separate accounts or checks and balances or a department for this and a department for that. It was all on his personal laptop. He's the only one with passwords to everything, and he was letting things lapse, certain registrations or filings and things. Because there was this shortage in money, he was like giving customers withdrawals in the most shady way. Listen to this. Cotten provided withdrawals manually, seeming to give preference to the customers who complained loudest in public forums. He sent cash in paper bags and shoe boxes to coffee shops, laundromats, and pool halls. So while these customers are having a hard time getting money and dealing with these shady money drops, he is spending money like it's going out of style. Gerry had a YouTube channel. He posted a lot of really short YouTube videos.
In another test of Canada's new plastic money, I'm going to see what happens when I put it in the microwave. We'll put it in there for a minute. It looks like it's melting. I should take it out a bit early. Uh-oh. All of the holograms have actually melted. They're incredibly hot.
He used that money to pay for the lavish life that he and Jennifer Robertson, his girlfriend at the time, they would travel so much. Then he was taking large sums of money, like $100 million or $50 million in one chunk, and putting it into these fake accounts under fake names that he had outside of QUADRIGA. First, he bought a private jet, a Cessna 400. Turns out that Gerry actually knows how to fly a plane. He's a pilot. Then he buys a boat, and he tells the guy who he's buying the boat from that he needs a boat that will allow him to get to the Caribbean without having to stop in Canada or the US. Then he had to do training for the boat, right? And it was during this training that he told the guy training him that he was planning to go to India soon to sponsor an orphanage, and that the Canadian dollar goes a long way in India. File that in for later. The Bitcoin bubble is growing and growing and growing, and inevitably it's gonna burst, right? So this is when the shit hits the fan. The value of Bitcoin is plummeting. Remember, half the Bitcoin and the money that's on QUADRIGA isn't even real money or Bitcoin. It's the fake ones that Gerry made. The real ones now, their value is plummeted. So now it's just really bad. People are trying to cash out because the bubble burst, and there's no money for them to cash out. Making matters worse is the fact that now $26 million of money they actually had is frozen because of suspicion of money laundering. So those house of cards that were wobbling, yeah, they're collapsing now. He's almost 30 now. Since he was 15, he's been doing these exit scams. So what do you do when you're an exit scammer and it's time to exit? When the jig is up, you take what's left and you exit. So keep that in mind when you see what starts to happen next. What happens next is either the craziest series of coincidences or the ultimate exit scam. First thing that happens is that Gerry and Jennifer get married. They get married, and less than 2 months after their wedding, Gerry writes that weird will. The will where he leaves everything to her and her chihuahuas, which, by the way, the one redeeming quality is, it's my favorite part of this story, is that the chihuahuas got $100,000. So 3 days after this new will is written and signed, Jennifer and Gerry go to India for their honeymoon. The one that he wrote like this, honeymoon. The quotes were put by him, not by me. And you know me, I put quotes where they don't even belong. So they get to India, they go to the orphanage, and once they get to Jaipur, that's when Gerry has his tummy troubles. And they take him to the hospital. It's called Fortis Escorts Hospital. This is what it says. Mr. Cotten had vomited 10 times. He reported 15 episodes of watery stools. He had experienced crampy abdominal pain and some back discomfort, was feverish, had a background of Crohn's disease, according to the death report prepared by Dr. Sharma. Still, the initial diagnosis pointed to little more than traveler's diarrhea because Mr. Cotten showed no signs of distress. His blood pressure and pulse were both normal. His condition took a sharp turn. He became fulminant, which is a term describing a rapid and severe deterioration. He became restless and developed respiratory stress as well. We shifted him to the intensive care unit, and they said his abdomen showed signs of stiffness, an indication of perforation, and that it was too late for a CT scan or surgery. They had to stabilize him. He went into cardiac arrest. He was resuscitated. Blood pressure was low. They put him on a ventilator. He went into cardiac arrest again. They resuscitated him again. But the third time it happened, he could not be revived, the doctor said. So then, December 9th, 2018 at 7:26 p.m., Gerry Cotten is declared dead due to complications from Crohn's disease. And the cause of death was cardiac arrest. He was 30 years old. The next day is when that incident happened with the doctor that didn't want to embalm Gerry because things were weird. Once Jennifer gets all the documents that she needs from the Indian authorities, she takes Gerry's body back to Canada and they have the closed casket funeral. People were taking the death certificate from India with a grain of salt for two major reasons. First of all, there was a typo on the death certificate. Cotten's last name was misspelt. Instead of Cotten, it was spelt Cottan. And then people were saying you can actually get fake death certificates from India somewhat easily, especially if you have a lot of money. And then some stuff came out about the director of the hospital 2 months before Gerry died in that hospital. He was convicted of financial fraud. So they're like, oh, you have a corrupt medical director. You have a place where it's easy to get these. You got this guy with all this money. Like, is it really that hard to believe that he faked his death and took all the money and the passwords with him? I don't know. You tell me. The thing is, even cops suspected that Gerry may have faked his own death. They kept asking everyone that they interviewed, do you think Gerry faked his own death? It says, they asked me about 20 times if he was alive, says one witness who has intimate knowledge of Quadriga's workings and has been questioned by both agencies. They always end our conversations with that question. The thing with the cops too is that they were kind of out of their league when it came to this because it was very like high-tech digital currency, Bitcoin, all that. Like, quote, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police asked questions so rudimentary that they shocked the experts they interviewed. It's just completely out of their wheelhouse, says a Quadriga creditor and cryptocurrency expert. I spent a couple of hours on the phone explaining the basics to an RCMP, that's like the Canadian police investigator, and came away feeling like he'd be much more comfortable with a dead body, a loaded gun, and a trail of blood. They didn't really know what they were doing. Okay, and so obviously that made it very difficult for anyone to get any justice. But in the end, Jennifer gave back like $12 million that she had liquidated and taken for herself. She had to give back a lot of the properties. She got left with her car, her clothes, some cash, like $100,000-ish of cash, a retirement plan. So even with Jennifer giving back some of that money, it went to the creditors. The little guy didn't get anything. There was a lot of little guys who didn't get anything. And so they started calling for Gerry's body to be exhumed.
Exhume the body and frickin' check the DNA.
They had a lawyer put a formal request, and then Jennifer responded, and she said, quote, "It is not clear how the exhumation or an autopsy to confirm the cause of Gerry's death from complications arising from his Crohn's disease would assist the asset recovery process further." So authorities never commented about the exhumation, and Gerry's body was never exhumed. Those are the facts. Now let's talk about the theories. So you basically have two theories. One is he's alive, and the other one is he's dead. So let's go with the official one, which is that he's dead. First of all, it seems like from the reporters who went to India and spoke to everyone, it seems like the story's legit. They feel like it would be a lot of different people and it would be hard to do this cover up, and they just feel like they didn't find any evidence to show that there was a cover up, and they didn't find any evidence to prove that there wasn't, but they left with the feeling that he really died. He had Crohn's disease, that's real. And it is possible that he could have eaten something or drank something that totally messed with his Crohn's, gave him a severe flare-up that wasn't addressed properly in the beginning, that caused it to get so bad that he died. You know, then there were people saying, well, you know, he probably didn't run away and fake his death because there was no money. He spent all the money, like the money in the accounts with the passwords that he had, that money was all gone. A lot of these accounts that Gerry had the passwords to were actually empty. It turns out Gerry had taken that money out and put it into other accounts that were outside of QUADRIGA. It was spent on like bad gambling, like he would bet crazy amounts on really shitty Bitcoin companies that weren't going to succeed, and then it would flop and the money would be gone. But turns out that in itself is a kind of scam. If you are losing to someone with an account that's actually yours, so it looks like you lost the money, but really that money went to an account held by someone that you control, or it's an alias and it's actually your account. And so a lot of people think, this brings me to the fake the death theory, that that's all part of the exit scam, that he actually made these bets and lost this money as a way to sort of launder the money and put it in another account that he would have access to when he faked his death. Are you still with me? It says here, quote, "What if the furious trading on other exchanges near the end of his life was not careless, but calculated?" This is a question that led the lead investigator for the FBI's cybercrime division, Jennifer Vanderveer, has posed to crypto experts. It is theoretically possible to conduct high-volume trades in such a way as to launder funds, provided that the trades are exotic enough to ensure that the losses accrue to another account that Cotten or an associate controls. Is it even possible to fake your death? Well, turns out it is. It's difficult, but it is. There is a woman who wrote a book called Playing Dead.
Faking your own death in and of itself is not a crime. There is a whole checklist of documentation you need to provide. Death certificate, documentation from the mortuary, witness statements, police reports. I ended up getting my own death certificate, a police report, and witness testimony.
Died in a car crash.
I died in a fiery inferno of a car crash, yes.
Putting it all together, did he have a reason to fake his death? Yes, he did. The walls were closing in. He didn't have money to pay back investors. The value of Bitcoin was crashing. He had funds that were frozen. Basically, the jig was up. So this was the perfect time for an exit scam. Has he done exit scams before? Yes, actually, since he was 15, he's been doing them. Okay, so let's say he was going to fake his death and he had a reason to fake his death. How would he go about doing it? Well, it seems like with the right amount of money and connecting a few people who are in control, theoretically, you could do that. Theoretically, you could fake your death. Gerry Cotten, and keep in mind, the funeral was a closed casket. Nobody really saw who was in there. They're not exhuming the body, so we don't know for sure. All we have is Jennifer's word. And do we really trust Jennifer's word after all those moves that she made? She was so grieving, she couldn't tell the customers he was dead, but yet she could call and try to sell the airplane. She wasn't grieving that much to do that. Then there's this other theory, and it's called the Haitian zombie powder theory. And basically, this is like a drug that you die for a little bit. It looks like you die at least, and then you come back to life. And so people wonder if he took this drug and everyone in India thought he really died, but then the body was switched. Then there's the whole thing with the will, right? Why wasn't there a contingency plan? Why wasn't there a dead man switch? Why would you go through the trouble of writing a will right before you die? And one of the most important things that are supposed to be in this will is not even mentioned at all, to where everybody who's familiar with this industry and everything about it is like, what is going, this is the oddest thing we've ever seen. Even the police suspect that, and they're privy to things that you and I don't have. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think he faked his death? Do you think Jennifer knows? Do you think part of the deal was that Jennifer would get some of this money and that's why she did it? There are witnesses who say that they saw Gerry walking through the airport with $50,000 in cash and other associates walking with similar amounts of money, getting on his private plane when they travel. Remember how they traveled the world and they were always traveling, and Gerry even bragged about how he never got stopped by customs, and they have all this large sum of money. What if they're moving that money overseas? So why did he mention honeymoon with the quotes? What was that about? Me personally, I'm like, I don't 100,000,000% believe he faked his death, but I am leaning there. There's still a few things where I'm like, I mean, it's possible he could have been stressed out, had a horrible Crohn's disease thing, and all those are coincidence. I mean, I don't know. I'm leaning towards he faked his death is what I'm saying, but I'm not sure. Okay, so let me know where you guys are at on that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.